They say it's time to start. Hello, everyone. Okay, I think we are having an open air session, aren't we? Can we see the slides, or shall we dance and sing? By the way, I have 35 minutes left. I have a timer. Or shall we ignore it? Okay, I think we shall. Again, hello everyone. We have two stand-up performers today. Evgeny Voloshin, strategy head, and Sergey Golovanov, Kaspersky chief expert. Yeah, okay, we'll talk about prolonged attacks. Okay, this is, yeah, this should be shown here. And as we thought about the conference and the speech, well, I'll give you some background. Okay, prolonged attacks or persistent attacks. This is not about a few days or a week, like people, these wrongdoers, they get to your network and they try to exploit some vulnerability, escalate, get the domain, and destroy everything or encrypt everything or steal your data and so on. No, we are talking about a different thing here. We have worked in forensic for many years, and we have accumulated a huge body of experience about these attacks. And you know, well, please speed up. I'm running out of steam. Yeah, and Sergey, and I think he is dealing with it for a long time. We've been dealing with it in the BI zone for 7 years. I mean, in forensics, and we've accumulated quite a lot of attacks like that. And we have tried to pick 4. And the ones which are unusual in a way. Are you done? Okay, I thought you would find more words and some dirty words. Yeah, why not? Okay, some storytelling before we start the nuts and bolts discussion. Sergey and I spoke at a different conference, the Urals Banking Forum, without billiards. It was in Yekaterinburg. So there we are. We have spoken. Some other speakers were there. So, you know, the strongest guys at about 3 in the morning, they go to a place to have some fun. So there we are drunk and we are discussing the reason for staying in our profession. So why am I in practical IB or cybersec? That's because in 2011 or 12 I attended the PhD conference, and then, okay, I cannot remember what followed. Yeah, I can remember, because I speak at PhD quite often, and I say, okay, now we're discussing this thing around our beer, so let's speak at PhD about it. And okay, the positive guys say we need an abstract. Okay, a month goes by, and then Dmitry Sklarov from Positive emails me, okay, we need an abstract, we need to give you a time slot. I'm emailing Zhenya, I'm telling him, time has come, we need to apply to the PhD conference. And Zhenya tells me, okay, I will answer Sklarov directly. And I said, I need an abstract. Okay, and then he says, what kind of abstract? And it turns out that we had a very good round of drinking, so that someone forgot all about it. Yeah, and he's emailing me, and I had this painful memories, and he has a screenshot of our speech. Okay, now is the introductory part. I have talked about this. There are many quick attacks. People come by quite quickly, so they want to deface the encryption, some ransomware attempts, or sometimes if they are not smart enough, they try to drop VMs. Okay, sometimes you just don't notice attacks and for quite some time, and that's what we are going to talk about today. Okay, the CISOs or CISOs, they install CM processes and they, prepare documentation and so on and so forth. But in about 10 years, Anton Karpov said it. I live in the paradigm that I have been hacked, and I should find where I have been hacked. So I remember this phrase, and so, I think this is my credo in a way too. Okay, to live in this paradigm, you, as a professional cybersec guy, you should have paranoia. And I think this is a necessary feature. You should talk to the Chief Information Officer. So this guy should be, or Chief Security Officer, he should be paranoid. So we have this zero trust approach, which is quite interesting, or zero trust concept. And you should revise everything, and you should check yourself, your subordinates. You should invite third parties to revise your process. So this compromise assessment should be an ongoing process. Okay, let's change our position to make the clicker work better, but it's your turn now. Okay, the first case will be presented by Sergey. Okay, thanks again. We have 4 anecdotes, and prolonged attack. You know that there are many reports about it in 2023, and once upon a time, well, now when we go to investigate an incident, so we know who our adversaries are and the utilities and the toolkit they have. Quite often this is a weak password, so in the logs we often see the brute force of passwords. We have non-patched systems, and a lot of incidents we have where companies were not important in 2021, but they became really interesting in 2022. So the idea is that you come and you can reproduce this incident, because a firewall or a VPN is vulnerable, even when you are responding to the incident. Okay, we see a lot of things like phishing entries, and some emails are sent through a link. So you go through the link and you leave your password and login there, or there are some malware attachments. Okay, so we go to the company, then we have Cobalt Strike or Metasploit, Meterpreter, and some other tools. They use Sliver quite often. It's for the Windows and for the Linux infrastructure, and it's easy to identify with the network traffic analysis or when you do forensics. So Sliver is in the Go language. This is a multiple megabyte piece, which is hard to always see when you investigate. Okay, just to be clear, a lot of incidents, so we would come quite often. Here is another incident. Okay, it is quite standard, a lot of basic execs in the network, there are WMIs, so we start looking at the utilities the intruders are using, we find in packets. Okay, it's fine and great. The only thing which is not clear is the point of entry. How are they managing all this? Okay, we have some IPs in the logs, so we look at them, we look at the map, and we see that this is Linux infrastructure. And that's where we say hello to the great world of Linux infrastructure forensics. You know, we faced a working machine of the system administrator, which is managing the whole infrastructure. And after that, we are in for a very interesting story. What is it about? Okay, now it's 2023, and we are still hearing news that Mozilla has add-ons which can steal cookies from the browsers. So there are people who install a lot of them, then their passwords are stolen, and then Mozilla just removes the add-ons. Okay, it hasn't always been the case. There used to be a time when the Firefox plugin was a key to launch any binary program. So what happened? When API was available, it is called process run, people would install an add-on. Well, it doesn't really matter. To download videos, to change the colors of the website. So inside the plugin, you can launch any code. And all this dates back to 2015. And at about that time, we had an incident when the system administrator computer had the entry of the intruder from this plugin. So they start with cron tab, and they get a foothold there. They also get a foothold in adapter, and so in 2023 they have the in packet, and they come to this company in 2015. So the guy was wandering around for 8 years, and we think that he was in prison. Okay, another thing. You know, intruders, you know, how they survive the reinstallation of the system. The computer of the system administrator has been updated twice since 2015. 2 times. And 2 times the malware moved to new hardware. So when we took this computer, it had the SSD drive. Okay, how? How could they survive this? They have a good command called rsync. And when the Linux users move to a new computer, they take with them their working directory, yeah, the installed software, including, they say cron tab, so they take their cron tab with them to the new device. And this malware code has survived this reinstallation twice. Okay, all this incident started in 2015. Well, there are some computers with a lot of garbage installed, like torrents and computer games and so on. If you think that it's not the case on Linux, well, you stand to be corrected. Okay, what shall we do? Some takeaways, some recommendations from the report. Number 1, debsums. What is it? This is a standard tool to control the sums between the executive files you have in your local machine and the internet packages. So all the exec files can be quickly found this way. So we have a repository of the intruders. So we should understand that the computers should have one repository. It should be one and the same, and it shouldn't have any malicious code. Okay, 2015, the incident, and the logs, as you know, it's 2023, and we have the packet. So we had the logs for a few months at best. And doing this forensics with this Linux station, it was only 1 year old. Okay, so then you put all the logs in the SIAM. And another thing, restrict access to the domain controller from the Unix infrastructure. Why so? Because they don't need this domain control, frankly speaking. Okay, now it's your time. Yeah. Our case is much younger, 2018. So quite unexpectedly, the company comes to us complaining, saying everything is bad, and they have some bad language about us, and they say dirty things about the admins and the country and so on. Please come. Okay, we do come. So if the intruders are listening to us, if you watch this, so please stop impacting Friday and Saturday, because it's really difficult to work on weekends. You know, 80+% of incidents happen on a Friday or a Saturday. Please remember that we are human beings too. Yeah, please be kind to us. Okay, so we go there quite quickly. Everybody goes on a business trip. We start our investigation. Okay, so you know, they brought us to the place, and then we say, okay, guys, come. And so here is the EDR. So 5 or 4 years ago, we would usually do with Yararus or with some other things like looking for these things. And now EDRs are quite interesting. So we have the open source and we have commercial versions. So EDRs are really good. So if you do some forensics or if you're responsible for security, if you have this solution, it's really cool because you can quickly collect data from the machine. You shouldn't use some old coffee, something like that. Okay, so you can find the IT experts from the customer. So they are also unhappy. They are also rolling out all this stuff. Everybody is running. And so we understand that there are some suspicious processes, some other things which shouldn't be there. There is an Apache OpenAM to identify things. So I think that many have faced this, and so they haven't patched things for a long time. How come they have had this OpenAM for so long? Why do they have only one group inside? Well, this is not clear. The results. So this service shouldn't be sticking out. Okay, we start collecting all the telemetrics and the logs from the machines, and we can see the obvious. I wonder whether it's here. Okay, we see the classical shell, which is pretty primitive. Okay, it's nice and fluffy. We have similarly found the one. Okay, they don't have any information about themselves. So usually, if they start offering info or they start encryption, they usually start asking for bitcoins, 1, 2, 10, or 16 bitcoins. Okay, but we don't know anything about the intruder. Okay, we are going on, we are collecting data, and it's 2022. So the incident is 4 years old, and we don't have any logs, as Sergey mentioned in his case. So we have the CM, but with the Linux infrastructure, well, they didn't download it and so on. So the processes are not there. Okay, we have found a couple of other interesting processes, and some tunnels and portals established. Okay, that's clear. But then we find an interesting thing. He was at ease in these machines for quite some time. He spread there quite widely, so he just started mixing his own machines and the company machines, and he left some private keys there. And we looked at this for the first time, and we couldn't believe it. Well, no. Oh, is it really the case? Well, cool. Well, if you have anything like that, don't use it 100%. This is not ethical. This is not standard. And we have some articles about it, so people will complain. So you cannot do this without a court ruling. So if you have a court ruling, then you can hack back or do some things like that. Okay, we discussed this case, and then it was clear how to quickly treat the customer, because the guy had been in the infrastructure in all the important places. Okay, it was quite straightforward. We found this, we cleaned it, and so on. Okay, what to do? Okay, number one, we should have some basics of vulnerability management, and you should update the things you have installed, because critical RCEs and vulnerabilities are mentioned and published every month, or sometimes a few times a month. Well, you should take care of your perimeter. You shouldn't have some things sticking out there, and you should have experts inside your team to monitor this, and it should be like a process. It's not like going there once a year or having a pen test. So you should have a well-established process, and you should regularly control all this stuff in your system. And just again, do compromise assessments regularly. The guy was at ease in the network, and so the indicators of compromise and artifacts were multiple there, and any investigation on whether there was anybody in the network would show, or would have shown, that the intruders were there. Okay, thank you. Sergey, Thank you very much. The guy confused the public key and the private key. You know, this is quite interesting. Okay, my computer is your computer is my computer. Yeah, like in communism. Yeah, this is our computer. Yeah, indeed. Now your infrastructure is our infrastructure, and so on. So you know, you can sometimes connect to the other party, but you don't have the whole network map. Maybe this is your computer. Maybe it's a Raspberry Pi in Germany. Okay, this is the customer infrastructure. Yeah, so this is quite interesting. Okay, you can do some forensic there. Yeah, it would be even funnier if the IT experts started rolling out some EDR installed on the hacker's machine. Yeah, this would be nice. Okay. Slow attacks. Okay, when you respond to incidents, you quite often have TTP. So you have the attacks, and you can split this attack by this matrix to see the techniques used by the wrongdoer. Okay, this matrix is fine. It is sometimes used for attribution, sometimes it is not. In any way, well, you should mention this in the report. Okay. Usually an attack can be split into several steps. So we have the kill chain, we should have a few elements. So this starts with surveillance. So when we have the net flow, we can see the surveillance when there is some IP address trying to connect everywhere. So when responding, we have some information on where the surveillance started and where it ended. Number two, the intruder should come to the system. They start anonymously, then they start stealing and using passwords. So how can you identify this? Using the security log. Okay, the network. They try stealing passwords which are there in the public, so they should try to connect and steal them. Okay, when they connect, we have the Windows logs. For instance, we can see the IP coming and stealing a file. Then they need to stay with the system, like they launch an exe file through the Samba, they started through a base exec, and they add it to the auto run if they want to. So they get a stronghold there. Okay, do you understand what I'm talking about? Okay, so the incident 2023. So we come and we see an exe file in the system. Okay, those who have done pen tests understand what it is to send an exe file and to launch it. Well, this takes 2 seconds, doesn't it? Okay. Okay, here is the incident. Surveillance. 2020. System entry 2021. Copying files. January. Loading the exe file. June. And this is quite interesting. The guy copied the files, but he didn't launch. He coded it as a service a few months later. So the exe file is there, nobody cares, and a few months later the local admin comes and makes it a service. And this service starts running close to the new year. Well, as Zhenya said, dear intruders, please don't do this stuff on Friday or Saturday. Could you please do it quicker, number one? And could you please avoid, winter holidays? We are human beings after all. We want to celebrate. Okay, I don't know what I can show here. Yeah, from the forensic point of view, it looked funny. So we thought that they were kind of cheating us. It wasn't really possible, but we had the SAM and we had some net flow about the previous years. And what we saw with the hard drive was a good match for the logs stored in the infrastructure. Okay, that's the way it was. Okay, what kind of files were there? Okay, the intruder wasn't a quick guy, to put it mildly. What did he send us? Okay, number one, to read the files directly. You know that we have domain controllers, we have the reddit storage, so to load the passwords, usually have this command disasync. And there are many things like that when you see disasync and you can get these things, but it wasn't the case. And he just took pieces of this file and he had an implant for this. Okay, another kind of headache. He was not very quick, and all the implants, all the exec files, they were all passive. So they didn't have any admin, they didn't have an IP for the software to connect to receive commands. No, he would come, he would connect to the implant, and he would copy the same set of hashes. And another thing, the exe files, they were loaders. So the payload was stored in a separate file. Okay, and this is an interesting case. The file is there, but the payload isn't there. The payload is there, but the intruder is not using it. Okay, to understand how they connect to the infrastructure, we had to lay some traps. The implant is here into the PTC port, so we just put the PowerShell to open the port and to lock everything coming there. It took us quite a long time to wait for this thing to be kind enough to connect to our traps. We waited for a few months, and after that, finally, here the alert comes from the PowerShell that the intruder is there and is sending some implant commands. Okay, and then we find a lot of tunnels. Okay, since all of that was done through the Apex, so all the admins received some notifications that the wrongdoer is here and there. So we running all the infrastructure, all the Linux infrastructure. We started the LSOF, all of it, and in the LSOF you could see a few leaps, how the intruder was opening the tunnel to connect to the domain controller. Okay, conclusions. The incident happened in 2020. That's where the surveillance started. The intruder, well, unlike the first case, it wasn't a long gap. He was lucky that 8 years later he still had access to the company. No, this is not the case. Here the intruder was really slow indeed. He did the right things, and he really hoped that we would have a SAM, and there the security logs were stored for a few months. So he had this approach that we wouldn't have any logs for file creation, for the server, the launch of the server. So all of this was missing from the SAM.
We were lucky enough, and in essence we could store that. We have saved it up. So what to do? In essence, those who do not have NetFlow, you have to. This is a must-have. You have to have it. And in essence, these should not take big space on your hard drive, because, for instance, if you have to install actually a controller on CTPC pedant, that would require a lot of traffic, a lot of authorizations of the users, and every authorization has to be done with a record on pickup. So that looks nice, but you better do that through an open source utilities, enterprise utilities, and many hardware can do that on their own, and big volumes of traffic would be saved up, and you can store that for several years. And then, actually, this attack by an ill-minded person actually could be traced for several years back. Bear in mind that the ill-minded person needed only passwords. He did that once every several months, and one of the recommendations in that case was to change passwords as frequent as possible, because actually the malicious user had to visit the infrastructure more frequently in order to get the updated passwords. Then I told you that actually we installed PowerShells, some traps for the ill-minded people, but these can be done by means of the canaries. For instance, log name of the domain of the admin, which is never used. So this canary is used the following way, for instance. If you double-click it, and you see the features of the account, and you may see when it was used the last time. For instance, you know that this admin name is never being used, and the time has changed. So it means that this should sound an alarm that the ill-minded person is already there. So Evgeny said that I was hacked, and I have to live in that paradigm. So the canary will help you to notice that. And number 4, that's the same message, the same alarm. If you have a Linux infrastructure, it has to be separated from one another. For instance, there are some Java-based systems, and there are some Unix-based infrastructure, but in Java actually I had to ram home to authorization, and it would be applicable to 1 or 2 hosts. But actually you can make exceptions for the firewall rules, but when one sub-network can totally ping another one, this is not right, and the malicious users can take advantage of that. So let's change our places. So the case number 4 is quite interesting in a sense that there are some extras from soap opera there. That's a story about the nation-state attack. I will not say what country it is, and in every incident is high profile, and it would emerge with certain call signs so that we do not confuse. There might be dozens of such incidences, so you have to get some catch-an-eye name in order to dub the incident. And this incident was called Lяньхунь Uncle, and again, Lяньхунь Uncle. But I will not name the country. So what happened initially? At the shadow forums, we got a story about the sales of some unknown packs of files. We started research, and it turned out that that's a very important piece of documentation, some drawings, as far as this is a nation-state attack. So it means that it is surrounded where actually you should avoid telling the names. So we started communicating to the malicious users, and we asked for samples. And can you smell the shisha? Well, actually, we communicated to the malicious user. We got a sample, and we understand that with that sample, we do not want to do anything. We don't want to even look at that. We call for the security guys to tell them, look at that sample. And they said, oh, so let us investigate. We started our investigation, and we started investigating into those malicious guys. And we're using async and non-async methods in order to find out where the malicious users got that samples. So let me skip that non-async thing. But it turned out that the criminals just hacked some random VPS in Russia, so they saw some interesting files and decided to sell that. And there is actually a maxim that that was a frog playing with a snake or something like that, so they hacked it and they got the drawings. So actually, how this data was uploaded on the VPS. When we investigated the story, we realized why this important data, and we were checked by the security people, how actually it was uploaded. We checked with that organization and we started our investigation. Well, the security service immediately told us, well, VPS in Russia, the files are locked in the security contours. So it means that it was the insider who actually dropped the files. If you think that this is an inside, so most probably this is not an inside. There might be some exceptions, but that's the rule. Very often we check with certain organizations and first thing they tell us, this is the insider who did it. Somehow the people think that this is less humiliating than admitting that you were hacked or that someone actually dropped the files by accident. And usually people will tell in the public domain that it was the insider who leaked the data, and very often that you read that it was leaked by the insider, but actually probably most likely it was an insider with a zero-day vulnerability who hacked the system, but it might be actually much more simple. So it might be some old lady who broke the cable and that's it. So we started our investigation. We had our IOC, IP address of the VPS, and we started looking at that. We do not believe that it was the insider who did it. And we started investigating into the infrastructure of the client in order to find some traces, some footprints, some connection to VPS. We find the traces of the system and the backdoor, not on backdoor, but something else, PlugX, which is something that can be attributed to, and you may Google that, speak that aloud, but you may Google PlugX and ZX shell, and could be attributed to the state-nation attack for some specific state. And we understand it, that the malicious guys are already downloading the files. So the question was actually how much they managed to steal and how long they are doing that. And it turned out that they could steal a lot, and they did that for quite a while. The Chinese, I spilled the beans. Let's give a hand to our speaker. Okay, these incidences started almost the same way, but it might be some company and they might identify the incident on their own, but they may actually realize that they are not competent enough in order to identify everything, and they would turn to some frenzy guys, turning to some company and would arrive. In 2022, 2023, all the incidences are quite quick, so means that the malicious guys would meddle with the system and do some corrupt action. They would hack hardware, and they do not even need to talk to anyone. So these attacks are about our reality, but for instance, if we start our investigation, we see that there might be some PlugX, and we say, okay, these are the Chinese who did it. So this is a very valid verdict. So it means that actually the Chinese are not going to corrupt anything or to hack anything. They would actually just keep watching. So if this incident took place, this is not the worst case scenario. So what happened? Another story about the games of the frogs and the snakes actually means that the malicious guys hacked another malicious guy, and they stole some data and tried to sell that. And this story started back in 2014. So Bizon was not yet there when this whole system was hacked. The algorithm that was used there is quite high profile. There is some native story PowerShell, etc. And even there was a Mimikat. Mimikatz, which is making a lot of noise. All the antiviral software see that, and all of a sudden, no one was alarmed with that. These plugins things, which were being used, also are making a lot of noise as well, but they're really functional. And a lot of them were identified. I cannot say that, for instance, if we look at that case back in 2015, actually, they could hide very well, but in 2022 and 2023, and that case happened in 2022, the antiviral software could detect that very well. So the investigation was quite successful. A lot of people were disappointed with the fact that it was not an insider who did that, actually, because once there is an insider, he or she can be used as a scapegoat to shift the blame to. And as for the recommendations are concerned, first of all, you have to check that even the most basic things. You have to try to identify some plugins and other things that are making a lot of noise, but you have to look at how some native things are being used, such as PowerShell, or things which are being used by administrators, PCZ, etc. It means that they have certain things which are quite noticeable. For instance, DCC, which is being used. You can use that. As a guy from the previous case, you have actually just take it piece by piece, not to make too much noise. So you have to double check that and feed your paranoia. Waking up late at night and actually asking whether the system is being hacked or not. So this has to be alter ego as a security guy. And if it goes not to some Asian country, but it goes to some Russian region and would be some suspicious proof hosting, that would be the reason to think about it. That's a very frequent case when the people are not bringing that to their region, but rather making a hop or several hops as VPSs or anything like that in the country where the incidents took place. And the last story, that's you have to do a lot of segmenting, compartmentalization. As a recommendation, actually, there was a very flat network, which could be very frequently used, and you have to compartmentalize Windows, Linux, and your user networks. As for the takeaways, we told you about 4 cases, and we have several conclusions, several takeaways. So we repeated a lot of words. There are some actually Mimikatz, Cobalt, and NetFlow, other things which could be noticed very easily, but there is another background pertinent to these stories. Very frequently, such long-term attacks could be detected almost by accident, along with another high-profile incidents. For instance, we have a Telegram channel, which is being run by you-know-who, and then this Telegram channel starts publishing certain proofs and documentation saying that a certain company was hacked. And we are living in a very unstable time, and you-know-who has masterminded that, and the reaction to such a high-profile case would reveal another incidents. And this is an evil wind that blows nobody good. That's actually, we try to conclude our presentation with a kind of a meme, so there are some nice incidences, and the more we live, the more peculiar the incidences become. And actually, we have a little Q&A session, and we have gifts to you. Where are they? We stick to the time limits, and we have only 2 gifts that we may give for good questions. and wait until Sergey actually comes back, because I'm not happy taking our questions. Any questions? I do not see any question. So let's keep it for ourselves. I see the hand in the first row. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Alexander Kuznetsov, Solo. Back to your statistics, the investigations that you have, how many long-term attacks you have, and compromise assessment within your companies. Is it old? And can you replicate that experience for your clients? I will take the second part of the question. The second part of the question is about the compromise assessment. I'm a security guy of Bizon company, and we started that story not from the very beginning, but we have ADAR, and we have deployed that for Macintosh as well, and we are double checking that story. ILCs that we do have, the new ones, retrospectively we would check it again, so this is our must and something that I would recommend to everyone. By taking the first part of the question, we say that this is 50-50. So it means that actually once you start an investigation, you have two options. If it is really a national state where this has been just encrypted. So this is 50-50 chances. Any more hands? Yep, please. Pass the mic over there. I have a question. You spoke a lot about different high-profile cases or ACEs, but you didn't speak about anything customized. So, do you find more customized ACEs or trumps or anything like that? Well, according to my observation, well, the latest criminal groups are not using any trumps or aces. They are using some native systems. They would hack something by means of mimikatz or anything like that, something very high profile. But speaking about custom things, that's a very rare case. But there are some groupings, such as Karbonaka. They have their own framework, and they're improving that all the time. And this is a kind of shield against the sword game. So they're improving their attacking tools, and we're improving our shielding tools. But these stories are quite old. We are communicating to that grouping for quite a while, but in most cases, actually, we would be hacked through some basic things, some vulnerabilities when you do not follow the security hygiene rules. The latest framework was absolutely customized one, and custom framework, which is reading from the hard disk certain script. And okay, there is a customer, and I tell him, you have to change passwords, and he says, why? And I say, so there is a malware which reads a file, and he tells me, prove it that this is this very file which hacks my password. And the framework, I don't remember. It was a custom one, and it would fail, and when your actual process fails, there will be a verfall, and would be pieces of SSD. That's a custom one, a very high quality one, and we had 5 such cases. Well, and there would be thousands of such incidences, so the percentage is not very high. I think either they got that right or they didn't listen to us, this part of the room. Good afternoon. I have a question related to the hackback that you mentioned today. So, a case. A malicious user hacked the company, penetrated into the company, and became too audacious and decided to install the client with administration rules. We can see the maluser machine, and we see everything. So what actions would be regarded as a hackback? Well, actually, if we look retrospectively, a reverse way, so any activity, not just passive monitoring, would be considered as a hackback. So the boundary is quite vague. I think that the legislation has a lot of loopholes, but it would depend on who interprets that. I do not recommend to you to play these games. You just rather resort to the security forces. And the security officers are quite competent, and you may get necessary support, necessary tips, and they have their own tools, and you will get some legal tools to fight back. So sending exploits, this is something wrong. And even map is not always a norm. Well, I am an expert. This is the way I see it. Okay, we have time for a couple of questions more. We have 5 minutes left. 5 minutes left. I promised to ask a question. Go on. How often did you have any cases when, for instance, these were the mobile things which actually would be the entry point, would act as an entry point? I do not see who asked that question. I tried just to see. I'm here. I'm here. Ah, okay. Now I see you. So, using mobile devices to hack the system, to enter a huge infrastructure. I do not remember that. There were a lot of attacks made through the mobile devices, but this is about to enter and C, not to enter and B. Well, hacking an iCloud through a mobile device, that's a norm, but to enter or install some fake application on Android, well, to enter through a flash drive or through USB drive, that's I get. Sometimes some credentials would be stolen using mobile devices, but this is not a conventional way. This is not a part of the infrastructure. In essence, there are quite a few correctly built IOs. I don't see your faces, so I'm being blinded by the limelights, by the spotlights. Spotlights sound too high profile, too stilted. Speak louder, please. Were there cases when real infrastructure would be compromised through honeypot hacking? No, I cannot remember that. Honeypot actually indicates that it should be hacked, and you cannot hack it in order to penetrate into the real infrastructure. But, look, we have domain controllers, and these are our honeypots. Honeypots or honeynets usually would be deployed. There would be a galvanic deployment, and all these sham systems are usually compartmentalized, and you cannot get an access through them. So let's pass the mic to this part of the room. Pavel Kuznetsov, I have the following question. That's a self-defense section. Tell me, how long do I have to keep your logs? How long the logs could be stored? And this is the first part of the question. The second is about long-term attacks. Don't you think that this is just... They keep learning while they are hacking certain codes. They just decided to opt for the dark side, so they're just learning doing that. That's why it takes so much time. As for storing logs, I would say no more than 3 years. And if you have certain budget for SHD, so 3 years, that would be quite enough. Back to the logs, you do not have to store everything for 3 years. For instance, there are some high-profile logs, and it would depend as how they are being set. You do not have to store everything for 3 years. Some basic things, fails and entries. Actually, you have to store for quite a while, but certain incidences, high-profile incidences, you don't have to store that, for instance, if it is an infrastructural question. And some recommend to store that for a year, but 3 years would be okay. Well, bear in mind that there is a specific impact, there is a specific script. This is not the case. If it is someone which just learns to do that, and I do not believe in that, I do not buy that. It is not that actually some insider decided to learn how to hack the system. I do not think that this is a system. Well, that's a step-by-step disassing. That's a very interesting case. I've never heard about that. No, I have time for one question only, so there are two guys. We have time only for one question only. Yes, please. And the young guy is waving his hand. Pass the mic to him, and that would be the last one. Good afternoon, everyone. I have the following question: how to take out of that situation for the organizations that do not have a net wall? Well, we have Google, and we actually got up install NFCup there, and there would be three options. You have to make a storage for that, and the mort. These are three apt-gets. This is how you do that. Did you answer a question? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, thank you. Thank you. We have T-shirts. We have T-shirts, and they go to who? I like the first question. First of all, it was number one. Okay. And I will give this T-shirt to a lady for long and unique frameworks. Thank you so much. I think that we're just too lazy to throw the T-shirts. Thank you so much. We even didn't expect that we would gather such a crowd. Thank you for warming us up. And besides, actually, it has become much warmer because of